Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this Wednesday. I'm Jennifer Rose from Inspire Action. Our whole team is here. We were joking that it's like Groundhog Day every Wednesday. Here we are again, and here you all are, which makes us the happiest that you all continue to join us and be a part of this learning and growing and community in all of the important ways you have. So today we are going to talk about creative activities parents can do with children during remote supervised visitation services, an opportunity to kind of share some ideas and give you some thinking around how families can modify how they're spending their time together. We like to always thank the Office on Violence Against Women for their continued support and leadership around this work and of us. And we also like to note, while our work often reflects the guiding principles and the thinking and thoughts of the Office on Violence Against Women, we also, not everything that we say or express is from the office. It is Inspire's words and thoughts. So just a reminder of all of that. We will be recording this session as we have others, and as soon as possible putting it up on our website for those of you who want to listen again or share with your community or other staff. Please go to our COVID website page for all of our past webinars and updated information. So you have our whole team here. Again, this is Jennifer Rose. I'm going to give everyone else just a quick minute to say hello.
Hi everyone, I'm Rita Handra, Strategic Learning Manager with Inspire.
Hi everyone, Beth McNamara with Inspire.
Hi everyone, I'm Erin Fairchild. I'm a consultant for Inspire. Happy to be here.
And I will just say we are so grateful for Erin and her partnership and her being a part of the Inspire family and jumping in to share all of her wisdom and ideas around how we can best work with kids. And so I'm going to hand it over to her now. Thanks, Erin.
Oh, thank you. I'm honored to be in this work with you and with all of you on the webinar as well. I stress this, if you saw the previous webinar that I contributed to, I'm just so in awe of the way that you are all adapting and staying committed to the families that you serve, and hopefully to your own well-being and to each other. It's such a strange and challenging time in many ways, and to me really highlights the critical importance of supervised visitation in the lives of family, and especially kids who have experienced violence and abuse at home. So I just can't stress enough how grateful I am that you're kind of just continuing on, you are continuing on, which is amazing. So we wanted to take a moment to invite you to think about a moment of joy that you've experienced over the past week. I know that it can feel a little bit hard to hold on to that when we feel moments of joy, or sometimes I personally, speaking for myself, will feel a moment of joy and then kind of feel some of these voices coming back in saying, yes, but everything's so hard right now. Yes, but, and holding on to those moments of joy is actually, I believe, such a critical part of getting us through this time, and then being able to carry those threads into the future when we hopefully are building a safer, I hope, and better world for everyone. So if you all wanted to take a few moments, I'll be quiet for a moment and let you think about something that brought you joy. And if you feel comfortable sharing it in the chat, we'll hear from each other about that. So I can see some coming in now, which is already just making me happy. Tiffany says, having a good belly laugh with my kids. Apologies if I pronounce any of your names incorrectly. Jan says, so much spring beauty around us. Jen says, fresh fruit and vegetables. Antoinette says, being witness to the smile on the visiting parent's face when she saw her child on video after weeks of not seeing him. That brought me so much joy. That almost brought me a tear, but I'm reining it in. That's very moving. Getting up early on Easter Sunday to hide eggs for some happy little gals. I love seeing how people were still creating special time for kids during that. Talia says, something that has brought me joy is being able to have snuggle breaks from work with my son during all of this. Also, I'm sorry, there's a lot of noise outside right now. If you're picking up some of that, I apologize. I wish I could make it stop. Zoom game night, says Naila. Christopher, so many moments. Sunrise, sunsets, the moon, my partner, my daughter, my chickens, baking, gardening. Sounds like there's some homesteading happening over there. That's good. Fatine says, definitely spending more time with my son and husband has been a great highlight of these past weeks. It's hard. I just want to read all of them. It's so great. Going on solo hikes in the sun. That was from Patricia. Connie says, sitting out by a slough that's a short hike from Bend at sunset, watching an amazing array of birds in and near the water. And you can read them. They go on, and there's just some really great examples. I mean, they don't go on and on. There is an end, but I'm just so excited to see that everyone's finding these moments. And I think just make sure that you check in with the ones I didn't read, because it just makes it easier to get through this when we know we can hold on to this, what brings us joy. So moving on, we talked about this last week, and I know a lot of people are talking about this right now, but I always need to remind myself that this experience is traumatic in many ways. There's joy, just like with survivors of violence, we experience joy at the same time that we may be experiencing traumatic reminders or living with the daily impact of trauma, and this situation is no different. What we're facing is a collective trauma, and it's really important that we honor ourselves, that we're navigating a difficult time, and that we give ourselves as much grace as possible, and also extend that same grace to our colleagues and the families we work with. I need the constant reminder that if I feel foggy or less productive than normal, or unable to concentrate sometimes, and some days I feel like I was so busy and I couldn't even tell you what happened at the end of the day. Like, why did I feel so busy and what did I actually do? I'm not sure. Don't be hard on yourself about those things. And remembering that the families that you serve and the parents and kids are going through similar feelings of overwhelm, and that's just a part of the experience that we're having. Also wanting to remind you and myself that there are always principles of trauma-informed practice or trauma-informed care that we can fall back on. These are a few of them sort of translated. Connection and relationship. Always during a time of crisis, it's important. Crisis highlights, I think, what's always important and encourages us to do more of it. And so making sure that we maintain connection and relationship with the families we serve, with each other as colleagues, that we are as transparent as possible about what's happening with ourselves, with each other, with the parents and families we serve, trying to maintain as much predictability and routine as possible, especially in the context of remote visits, which feels like such a disruption to many. Also remembering the basics of lid flipping, which is that concept that when your body is flooded with stress hormones, when your brain is flooded with stress hormones, that your thinking brain, your kind of like abstract and concrete decision-making brain, where all your executive functioning is, that part of our brain goes offline during times of extreme stress. And so a principle of trauma-informed practice is to make sure that our lids are down, that our thinking brains are online before we intervene with someone else whose lid may also be flipped. That's that brain in the hand model that we've talked about before. And if you've been through children's immersion, you'll have seen us do a lot with the lid flipping. So, and we'll make sure that, I think there's just ongoing resources related to that you can access. But it's a key component of making sure that we are doing the best work we can in a crisis, is to make sure that we have access to our thinking brains, which requires slowing down and breathing before we help others get access to their thinking brains. And all of that happens the most successfully through collaboration. And something that really helps me right now is thinking that we are having this kind of collectively traumatic experience, and that I'm on the same plane as all of the people that I serve and work with, and that the same stress that parents in supervised visitation are experiencing may not be too different from stress you're experiencing. And so we're collaborators together in navigating this. The next slide. Also wanted to put out a gentle reminder that because none of us have ever done this before in these circumstances, there's just no room to come at it with a perfectionist attitude, because this is going to be a growth process for everyone. Instead, we can think about inviting connection and relationship and creativity and grace and adaptability, and ultimately, as you always do, safety. Those are the components that we want to invite into this time, so we can have grace and move away from the those habits around, I want everything to be perfect. We've got to let go of that during this time. Here are some general tips for connecting with young people during remote visitation. And I want to remind you, if you have questions, please enter them in the chat. I'm happy to stop at any point to talk more about something, or if I need to slow down, just let me know. So some general tips to keep in mind. Some of this is review from the previous webinar, but always good to remember that every step of the way we want to normalize this strange experience, which is kind of an oxymoron, but normalize that what's happening might feel strange. It might be a little weird and different to do visits in this way, and we're going to figure it out together. So that's kind of inviting into the space that you're sharing virtually or on the phone with children and parents, that everyone finds this to be a little bit new and different and hard in some ways and good in other ways. We'll move through it together. Remembering to be fun and silly when you can, to invoke play, especially with school age and younger children. And, I think as monitors and folks working in supervised visitation, you're usually really good at reading a room. And that's what you're doing here, is reading, like, when is it appropriate to be silly and invoke play and laughter. Making sure that you're spending time connecting with children and youth before and after visits, just the way you would with in-person visits. Of course, it's not exactly the same, but trying to remember to hold on to that as you can. Reminding everyone during your remote visits of the transition times with what we call narration or sports casting, which is an approach that actually is very helpful for kids who've experienced trauma, that you just openly talk about what's happening next and what's coming next. And so that looks a lot like, we're halfway through the visit, we have 5 minutes left, we have 2 minutes left, giving those times to ease transition. And you'll have to use your best judgment about visits that may be very short, given the logistics of remote visits. You want to also make sure that you're reminding children and youth and parents that tech issues may arise and it's not specific to them. We talked about this last week, but just because for children in particular who've lived with trauma and maybe some levels of chaos or unpredictability, they often perceive that things are just happening to them all the time and they have no agency over their life. That's a common side effect of trauma. And kids also tend to fill a void. If they don't know the answer to something, they'll make up a reason. And it's quite possible that children might think that there's something wrong with them or their family, and that's why the technology isn't working. So you're just reminding them that this may happen, and we'll get through it together. And it's been happening off and on to everyone. Also knowing that visits may vary greatly in length and level of engagement, and that's part of the adaptability and flexibility of not exactly knowing what's going to happen every time and being able to use your best skills and judgment. And that's really important for kids to be able to engage with adults who can be adaptable and flexible during this time, because they are on the same emotional roller coaster that we're on. So the next is, I want to invite you to entertain imagination. And this is a technique that you can use with all children. It's a great universal strategy for connecting with kids, especially when they're frustrated. It's extra helpful for kids who've experienced trauma. What some people call it giving a child in fantasy, which you can't give them in real life, is one of the ways people talk about it, is that if a kid is, a child or a young person is upset about something they wish was different, such as, I wish I was visiting my parent in person, you can respond with kind of entertaining what that would be like. So I wish that that could happen too. If it was happening, what's your favorite thing that you'd want to be doing with your mom or your dad right now? Or if they say something like, I'm so bored and sad and I want to see my friends, I wish I could go back to school, you can respond with something like, I wish you could still go to school too. If you were at school today, what would you choose to do? And with these approaches, you're sort of inviting them to go to that space that they wish they were in. And that could be really helpful in the context of remote visits and the planning you may do around them. Another key factor, which is always foundational to the work you're doing as in supervised visitation, is prioritizing safety, both physical and emotional, for adult and child survivors in supervised visitation services. And I know you know this, but it bears reminding that there's no one size fits all for remote visitation activities, just like there's no one size fits all for what happens in in-person visits. There's some guidelines and principles that you hold to, but they often vary pretty dramatically. And that's true here too, that what works for one family really might not work for another. And you're going to need to assess each situation based on the unique emotional safety needs of adult and child survivors. What could be safe for one child in terms of an activity or a game or an online game or streaming something together or a puppet show, as we talked about that last time. There's all kinds of activities happening remotely that may feel comfortable and safe to some children and not to others, given the dynamics of their family. So you really want to account for safety the way that you would in in-person visits. We're still using those same considerations. It's still the priority in everything that you're doing, and you want to make sure that there's no further harm coming during remote visits as well, which requires flexibility and adaptability. I keep saying that because it's like the words of the day. Luckily, you have Inspire Action here to help you problem solve through some of those unique safety concerns. And also knowing that I know you know this from in-person visits, but what could be safe and comfortable for one child could be very triggering and overwhelming for another child, even within the same family. And that could be true for activities you do in remote visits. You just need to know what the unique needs are the family that you're working with, and how you can kind of wrap in the activities and supports that are happening in a remote way. Any questions or comments at this point? Oh my goodness, I also have to pause to bring us back to a moment of joy, because I'm just seeing now that Bridget mentioned finding out that I'm going to be a grandma during the moment of joy reflection, and I think that deserves celebration. Congratulations, Bridget. That's exciting. So I'll pause again to see if there's any questions or comments, and then if not, share them at any point. But Beth's going to help us with this next slide. Thanks, Beth.
Hi, everybody. So as we move to conducting remote supervised visitation, it's going to feel very different for us as providers. It's going to feel very different for families, and helping them know what to expect and how to navigate this and how it will feel different and how they can be with their children in a very different way often causes anxiety or stress or wonderment about what they could possibly do with their time if it's switched so drastically. And so the purpose of our collective kind of thinking and gathering up as many creative ideas to support families during this transition was to support those families to make this feel better for them during this time. But we just wanted to put out there that we're not wanting to lose sight of the fact that we are still in this primary role of ensuring safety, and that should be our focus. We haven't shifted to an activity director or directing or over orchestrating visits in any way. So this is just kind of a compilation of helping you think through when families are struggling to how to be together in different ways, when they're not sure of how to spend their time together, and they're welcoming you into brainstorming with them and partnering with them in ways that can support their new connection time. There are lots of then ways that once we're invited in that we can make suggestions on how they can spend their time. So we just wanted to let you know that the pressure is off. You're not to kind of step in to be the role of like, let's make this as fun as possible and deviate from kind of your lens of safety. And so all of the activities that we're putting forth are things that you want to think about, but you also want to think about them in the context of where you're at in terms of your comfort level with technology and the platforms that you're using, and how you can seamlessly move in and out, and how you as a team can think about the unintended consequences of introducing certain activities and being kind of as nimble as possible. So one thing that you might try with a family and that you have made the suggestion to try may fail miserably. It might not work, or it's not interesting, or they didn't have fun doing it, or they didn't like it, or whatever the case may be, that then there's something else in your back pocket that you can try, and be willing to put forth some other suggestions, but then to also know the family in front of you. And if they're not looking for our intervening or orchestrating their time together, then we have to know that we are stepping out of that role as well. So it's all of this to say that it's giving you tools for your back pocket if they're needed, and great. Knowing that families are in a different space in time, they might need some support. So that was our hope, is giving you stuff.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate all of those reminders. Super helpful to stay focused on mission, even in difficult times like this when everything feels different. So now is a good moment to pause and think about age and development, just like you always would be doing for in-person visits. Those considerations are going to apply to remote visits. Not all children are not all children within the same age range are in the same place developmentally. And we've talked about, if you've gone through children's immersion training, you'll know, and maybe just from other life experience, that children can be the exact same age and just vary dramatically in how they manage and regulate their emotions, and how they handle frustration, in how they verbalize, vocalize, all play, all kinds of things. So age is often not a marker for where children are developmentally, and kids who have experienced trauma often vary pretty dramatically from each other, and sometimes don't match exactly what sort of people would explain as standard development, even though I always question standard development. So remembering that all kids are different, and a lot of times you are working with, I'm sure you know this, you're working with maybe a child who's 8 cognitively, in the way they can talk to you and engage around, the way they interpret information sort of feels developmentally on track for an 8-year-old, but emotionally they feel more like a 4-year-old, or they can have tantrums, or big upsets where their feelings are taking over, that seems a little younger than what you would expect for their age. And that's actually quite common for kids who've experienced trauma. And that could very well come into play during remote visits, because this is a time of disruption, and children and youth may also be experiencing this time as traumatic in some ways. So those things may be escalated. Different children within the same family may have different needs. You might want to think about shorter, separate time for each child in remote visits, just given what you know about family dynamics. And because there is such a range around development and age, you want to make sure that the suggestions you offer, if you do offer suggestions for activities, if as Beth mentioned, if it's working out to connect in that way with parents, they want the support around activities, you want to make sure that they can be modified and managed within the context of a visit to meet those different developmental needs of kids. And you're going to just use your best judgment. So we put together some ideas of different activities that may work for remote visitation. You want to pick and choose what's going to work best for you, and especially best based on whether or not it's phone only contact, whether or not it's a mixture of video and audio. You might be in a situation where you're in a video on a video platform with the child, so you can see the child and maybe the child can see you, but the visiting parent's only appearing via audio, just depending on what they have access to or what you've determined is safe. Or you may have phone only, or you may have everyone on video. So you want to just take all of these suggestions with a grain of salt in that context of what's going to work. And remembering, of course, that safety risks associated with some of these tech options are present, and they're going to need to be navigated. And, you know, you want to make sure that you're accounting for all of the different ways that a visiting parent who's used violence in the past might, you know, not that it's that complicated balance of finding the humanity in everyone, but also knowing that safety could be at risk, and understanding the platforms you're using. If you're using an online, we'll talk about this more, video platform, that you're really clear with yourself about some of the safety risks that may be present, like if there's private chat involved in an app, and we'll talk about that. You're probably not going to be doing that with an infant to a 2-year-old, but these are some ideas you can think about suggesting if parents are open. That the visiting parent can sing to the child, especially, you know, if there's a song they always sing, that could be really comforting. Visiting parent making faces with children. Visiting parent read stories to the young child. If they have storybooks on hand, that could be a great option. They can show the pictures and talk about the book. The parent can hold up a stuffed animal and use funny voices to talk to the child. That's sort of like a very easy puppet show kind of approach. And engaging in any kind of back and forth. We call it, in child development, we call it serve and return, but any kind of back and forth dialogue with the child, like, what sound does a cat make? What sound does a goat make? What sound does a cow make? All of those kinds of things that you can do. And knowing that, you know, for an infant to 2-year-old, those interactions could be very short. Like that might be a 3-minute video interaction if you're doing a video connection, and you'll want to make sure that you prepare parents, as we've talked about before, for that. So thank you, Beth. Next slide. All right, so remote visitation activities for kids ages 3 to 5. Some of them are similar, making silly faces, singing. You can start to get a little more advanced in what you offer, like, how many fingers am I holding up? Let's count to 10 as fast as we can. If there's video, you could say something like, how many pictures are on the wall behind me? Those kinds of things. More around animal sounds, reading a story out loud and narrating the pictures, doing a more engaged storytelling, having a dance party, listening to music together, drawing pictures of the same thing at the same time and then holding them up and showing them to each other or describing them to each other. Again, you're going to have to use your discretion about whether or not a visiting parent can do that safely, and that it will be okay emotionally for the child. Let's see, telling stories about favorite holiday memories could be an option if it's safe and appropriate. Just telling stories from your head with imaginative voices and being silly, and that puppet show idea that I remember someone brought that up last time, and that, again, you'll have to use your best judgment about whether or not that's a safe option, but it's definitely an option. Next slide. Elementary school age, some of the activities to 3 to 5-year-olds may also work quite well for elementary school age, depending where they are developmentally, but a few more ideas is you can build a story together. I don't know if any of you have ever done that. It can be pretty fun, where the adult or the child can start a story, and they could just say, like, who's the story about? Like, this is a story about XYZ, and this is what's taking place, and here's where they are, and they just go back and forth and build the story off of each other. Some parents do that already, or used to do it together, maybe when they were living in the same home around bedtime, so it can carry a lot of comfort. Story time, story hour. One idea is that if a visiting parent starts a chapter book, if a child's old enough developmentally to sit through reading a chapter book, they could then carry that chapter book. Might have to be a really long chapter book, actually, because we don't know how long this is going to go on. But if they bring that chapter book into in-person visits, it could be a really nice link. Or they could, one suggestion is to start a chapter book series, like Harry Potter. They're long, there's mini books, And that could be something where you're building a thread from remote visit into in-person visit that could be comforting and something to look forward to. Dance parties, singing songs together, more drawing games, charades, that could be really fun and easy. You can adapt games in person or for remote, like Simon Says or Red Light, Green Light. And sound effect game, guess what sound I'm making? That could end in all kinds of laughter. Our next slide. And then for youth, youth, by the time kids are in, junior high to high school age, they're going to be much more comfortable already with multiple apps and tech platforms, and they know way more than we do, likely, about how to engage virtually. But some ideas are listening to music together, watching a show together. There's multiple ways, not all kinds, but a few different ways that you can share a screen to watch something at the same time. You could play Pictionary, 20 Guesses, Battleship, virtual science experiments. I've never done that, but it sounds fun and interesting. Are there any other ideas that are coming to mind? Well, we're going to spend more devoted time on that in a few minutes, but as you're hearing these, I'm wondering if there's any thoughts coming to mind around some of these activities. I see that there's a question in the chat box that says, advice for helping visiting parents to think about these things. Some are a little defensive about us making suggestions for how they will relate to their child. Yep. I think going back to what, and I'm curious, anyone else can weigh in, going back to what Beth was saying is remembering that these are ideas for you to have on hand if parents ask. And they may not ask. And I think knowing, just being able to let them take the lead. And another way is also often, I see some suggestions coming in, that's great, is to just ask if they want to know, instead of, that's actually a tip that comes from something called motivational interviewing that some people might be familiar with, but just, would you like me to share some ideas with you for what other parents have been doing for remote visits? And then if they say no, then you're done with that conversation. But it's a really good question, and I know it's hard to manage that because I've been in that space with parents I work with when they're feeling defensive. I think it's really normal for parents to feel defensive in situations like this. So even just being gentle and normalizing that can be helpful. So back in the comments, we've got, my families have used zoo tours. Oh, I think, yeah, I've heard about those. That sounds fun. I'm so glad that multiple places are opening up opportunities like that. How to coordinate, right. I'm wondering how to coordinate activities like Battleship or chapter book if we aren't orchestrating or sharing information between parents. And that question is coming from Kit. I'm wondering how to coordinate activities if we aren't orchestrating or sharing information between parents. Beth, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, so if you are having a parent who is interested in doing a chapter book reading or doing the Battleship game, so a Battleship game you can do even over the phone. It doesn't have to be over video, and each person just has their own part of the game, and they can place their battleships wherever and do it that way. So the coordinating doesn't need to happen necessarily through the parents. You as a monitor can say that we would like to coordinate a couple of activities and try them out. I'm wondering if you have access to a Battleship game, or can I help you get access to a Battleship game? And would you be willing to then help the child unpack it if they need to help and have it be set up for them or something like that? In a chapter book, you can kind of decide based on the family if both parents, if they both need the same book, you can help coordinate ways to get the same book, or you can just simply let the visiting parent know that I can't get the book to the other child, but you could be the primary reader, and you could pause and show the pages, or describe the pictures that you're seeing in front of you, if that's not an option to have the same book at the same time. So it's really just managing you as the staff person, how it is that you can support what a visiting parent is asking, And of course, first filtering through what feels safe and doable from your standpoint in terms of what you can manage and mitigate, and then go from there.
Can I say one thing?
Right. Oh, sure, please.
Yeah. And I mean, and just to add, I think some of what I'm reading in your question too, Kit, is, historically, we've had some very like rigid kind of boundaries around sharing information or coordinating these types of things between parents as a safety concern. And not that it's not still a safety concern, but there may be ways right now that some of those things that we've historically had pretty firm lines on may shift a little bit, right? And checking in with survivors and asking them how they feel, starting with them and kind of getting a sense of where they're at and kind of how they feel about exchanging or sort of some coordinating in between, and if they're like, absolutely not, well, then it, of course not. But there may be some give in some of these places for some families in order to try to make this work best for kids in particular, so that it can be an experience that they're benefiting from and they're enjoying. And it may require, again, some of these places where we may temporarily bend some of the interactions or how we communicate between parents during this time.
It's that flexibility and adaptability thing, again, that the situation is requiring of us. And I think too that I correct me if I'm wrong, Beth, I don't think the message is you cannot ever orchestrate something like this happening. It's more that you're letting the parent take the lead and you're supporting them. So you might be doing a little bit of orchestrating, but it's in service to their needs and wants around the visit, rather than putting pressure on yourself to like come up with a menu of here's what you're doing today. Is that, yeah.
Yeah. Asked and welcomed into that space with a parent to say, yes, I would appreciate help, or I would love some ideas, I don't know what to do, then that leads us down a path of being able to then explore and brainstorm with them and partner with them on how to help that happen. But if you have a parent who wants nothing to do with our engagement in their time with their child, then that's okay too. And we have to know who's in front of us. I'm also seeing some other questions just about like, is having a puppet show appropriate, and a couple of other comments that I'm scrolling through. And really, mostly what is appropriate for one family may not be appropriate for another family. And so knowing what's happening and knowing the safety risks that are involved. And so blanketly saying this would never work for all families, there might be a situation where we would say, yes, we can't do that for any family, but by far more often, it's going to be based on how the family has risks associated with certain things and how then they choose to take that path. So if a parent is using a puppet show as an opportunity to introduce a lot of things that shouldn't be introduced in the name of animal talking during the visit, then certainly we don't want to have that happen during a visit. But if they're using it as playful fun and it's not triggering and it's not trauma inducing, and they're not using it to elicit information or all of those things that we would be concerned about normally, just if the family was in our center, we would intervene on behalf of that. So it kind of the same rules apply.
Thank you. And I also want to mention Megan shared an idea. We put together an indoor scavenger hunt list, such as toy with wheels, colored socks, photos, favorite stuffed animal. The kids loved moving around and showing the parent. It's so creative. And I can imagine how fun that would be for little ones. And Connie says, I think it might be helpful to also ask the visiting parent what they have in mind. If it's potentially problematic, we could head that off. Yeah, so it's a lot of like prep work and discussing before the visit to make sure you're all kind of on the same page and feeling good about what's happening. And again, why I'm so impressed with all of you, because it's a lot of work and thinking ahead, and I'm just grateful that you're doing it. So we can move on to the next slide. So these are some ideas that we came up with for screen sharing and streaming. And Beth is going to show some different examples of what that can look like. But the overview of things you can do is there's lots of live cams happening right now at aquariums and zoos and national parks and nature preserves that can be really fun and soothing to watch. There are free museum tours. We can see, there you go, free museum tours. Your favorite bands might have live performances, or child's favorite band, kid bands, YouTube story times, other people doing story hour on YouTube. There's also a Netflix Party Chrome extension. With that one, there is a chat option that comes with it. So that's something to think about. We'll talk a little bit more about safety with all of these, but the Netflix Party Chrome extension, I've used it. It makes it so that you can turn on something, and that one person, it would be you as a monitor, turns on something, a show or a movie on Netflix, and everyone can see it together, and it's playing at exactly the same time. You can watch any kind of short videos together. There's several options right now for virtual scavenger hunts, and you can make your own scavenger hunt list, I believe, at some of them at where there's live streaming happening. And you can also do screen sharing with hidden object kind of games like Where's Waldo. You just want to make sure when you're doing this, and we'll hear more from Beth, that you are in control of launching the activity as the monitor, and making sure that there isn't private chat between members using an app. One example we talked about was the House Party app, which has gained popularity apparently with adults, but has been during quarantine, but has been around for a long time. I used it with friends recently, and you can chat to each other separately, and you obviously don't want that option. So I think Beth's going to show us some things and give us some more tips for safety with apps and streaming.
Yeah. So just to reiterate what Erin was saying, so we want to just really think about how it is that as the monitor using the virtual platform, you're in control of what's being shown and what's being able to then be welcomed to both parents, or the child and the parent being connected together unintentionally. So eliminating all of those features that then connect the parent and child behind the scenes together, which is what House Party can do, is that then both parents and the child have access to this House Party app that then they can chat on that platform privately together. And there's no way to turn that off, for example. So thinking about other options that then the monitor, you as the monitor, can then control. So if you do your screen share, then they can watch it together, they can participate together, but you're in charge of knowing what people are seeing. So that's kind of the filter that we want to make sure you're paying attention to, and what you're introducing or willing to introduce. So I'm going to attempt to show a couple of things. This might not go well with the
You could do it. It's going to work.
Give them my best, and then if it doesn't, we'll go from there. But there's this live cam that you can log into. It has a gajillion different, if you can kind of see, so there's, like this is the manatee live cam that you can just watch together. These cute, adorable manatees. You can go up and scroll and look at bears. You can look at brown bears. You can look at dogs. You can look at cat rescues. You can look at horses. It's just a whole, so whatever the child is interested in finding more about, you can just kind of scroll through and offer it as an option to look. There's live feed, and then there's also, like there's a little message right now on the manatee live stream that they have migrated out of view of the camera, so they have the highlight reel happening live, so you can watch the highlights of the manatees together if that's so chose to be your desired way that you spend time together. So let me see if I can also share a couple of other options of things that you can then do together. To move all these windows. So you can do kind of a hidden object option. Let me see if I can put this on our screen here. So you can find things, and based on the age of the child, there's a whole variety of age and developmental opportunities that you can do. So you can put up kind of, let's try to find these 15 things together. The parent and child can do this together. They can look at the screen. They can try to find things. My suggestion would then be to also have a little answer piece so that if you have children who get frustrated or want to know answers, that you're prepared for that. If you don't and they just play, you know, however they want to play, it's an option as well. So that's an option for older kids. I know you could also do kind of a thing where you do the Where's Waldo? Who can find them the fastest? There's a whole myriad of, you know, if you're used to the Where's Waldo series, there's really simple Where's Waldo pictures. There's really complex, complicated pictures. You kind of want to know what your resolution and what parents are looking at on their screen. So if they're only on their phone, Where's Waldo will probably be maddening. So just making sure what you're introducing is appropriate to how you've decided people are connecting together, but that's certainly an option. Here's a little social levity for you all. Here's the social distance Where's Waldo edition, all 6 feet apart, very easy to find. I felt that was really super funny.
Beth, there's a couple questions. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think it would be a good time. People are asking, as the monitor, are you the only one who can click on Waldo? Or are you the only one controlling it? It's not a dumb question at all. As supervisors, are we controlling all of this?
Yes.
So do you want, yeah.
We are controlling all of it. So when you do a screen share, you have a couple of options in terms of then introducing back people's ability to screen share or not screen share. So when you move to a place where you can lock down your Zoom connection or whatever virtual connection you have, as a host, you can lock down who can then share screens. So as a host, you can be the only one who shares the screen, or you can open it up to other people being allowed to share their screen. So as long as you know that you're in charge of kind of how that's happening, that should be your default.
And one thing we had talked about that I think is a good idea, if possible, and really you should try to figure out how to make it possible, is to practice all of these with each other as colleagues before you do it with parents, so that you feel comfortable with how you're controlling things and what you're controlling. And if you're using a platform that's new to you, like an app or some kind of other way to play a game, we really recommend that you test it out first, so you know, and then kind of investigate it with that lens of what kind of contact can people have with each other through this app, and is it going to work for the situation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Now I have to attempt to get back the.
And while you're doing that, someone, Maya asked what platforms are being used for remote visitation. Is screen sharing available on all platforms? I could say that I know for sure, I know Zoom the best and Google Meet. And you can also screen share on Google Meet. Zoom has a lot easier and better functioning, I believe, around screen sharing and controls and navigating it as the panelist. But if other people have platforms, Skype, someone, yeah, please type in what other platforms you're using. Patricia says Skype has screen sharing and works well. I'm not sure what other, and I think Zoom, you know, you'd have to, your organization would have to pay for a pro account to make this work. I find Zoom to be the easiest personally. And it tends to have, I think it may be based on where I am in the internet connection, but Zoom, in my experience, tends to have a better connection and like usability. It doesn't glitch out as much as Google does. And the question, Beth, can you share which websites you were sharing? And I think there's a document in the works that will come out soon that will have a roundup of ideas and links to things that you can use.
Yeah, our hope will be is to give you this, sorry, I'm so futzing here, and all of the tutorials. There's a lot of Zoom tutorials that we're putting together just in terms of the platform itself. And then there's also tutorials on how to do online gaming on Zoom so that you have the controls in place, that you have the filters in place that you want to have. So for example, if you look at Jackbox Games, it's an online platform. The Visitation program would have to pay for that platform as an option for letting parents play, but then there's a Zoom tutorial on how to make that integrated seamlessly, so you as the monitor have full control over what's happening. You can close down chats, you can open that up, you can let people just have a controller to play the game together, but no other functionality. So we'll put all of that together for you.
And someone asked if this is being recorded so you can share it with staff, and it is being recorded. So yes, you will be able to share it with staff.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. So I think, yep, there's some more. You just talked about this.
So Jackpot Game, we said we would put that all together in one place for you all. There's also lots of app-based games that you can engage parents in playing if they both have a way to do that, especially for older kids. But just knowing what you're introducing and the technology behind it. And the only way I know a lot of this is that I have 2 teenage kids who keep me well in the loop and of what's new and up to date, and what's how you can circumvent things and those kinds of things. So knowing kind of the version that parents have. So Words with Friends, I was running these ideas by my daughter, and who's 18, and she said, yeah, that's a super awesome option, but just make sure that if they have the original Words with Friends downloaded, people can privately chat together. But if they have Words with Friends version 2, which is the newest version downloaded, then that option has been closed out. So just making sure that you're investigating what you're introducing before you introduce it, if you're asked to give some suggestions to families, and thinking through that.
Mm-hmm.
And then online karaoke, there also is this option where you can kind of control what comes up on the screen, and they can both play online. They can just both sing together using kind of this functionality of an online program. So was also another idea.
And Tara asks, which is actually a nice segue into our next slide. When you supervise the video visits, do you have yourself on camera, or do you hide your video and only show video if you intervene, or if it's necessary so the parent and child feel less awkward having a monitor being part of the video chat? And I'm curious to hear from other people. If you can type in, I don't know if I could pause and say, Beth or Jen, is there guidance on that specifically?
I think it depends on the family first. So knowing what families need. So if you have a child who needs to see you during the visit, you want to make sure that you can facilitate that happening. But if you feel like your face is getting in the way of their ability to interact, and that there's no reason that your face needs to be up on screen, then I would take it away. So there is no standard answer. I would say knowing the family and what they need to make this feel as comfortable as possible and as safe as possible.
And Patricia shares, I hide my picture. Most of my kiddos are little and got distracted by my video being there. Terry says our monitors start off with the video on. Once the greeting is done, our cameras are disabled. Any other thoughts people want to share about that particular question? Beth, were you going to say? Sorry, I cut you off, I think.
Yeah, just to remember not to make a standardized approach, because what works for one family may not be feeling comfortable for another family. So making sure we're not getting into this, we do this always response, because that pulls us out of this tailored approach to what families need.
Talia says we're planning to start the video on and keep them off unless we need to intervene. Or if we pop back up, that might be sort of a prompt to the parent to change the subject. Yeah, and again, just remembering that flexibility and adaptability based on the needs of individual families. I think one thing I would urge us to remember, I'm always reminding myself this, is that when things are different or hard, especially in a crisis, one of the things we kind of naturally do as humans that are trying to find stability in chaos is to start to make rules. And we need rules. I'm not saying no rules, but I am asking us to slow down a little bit and think about if it's something, if that rule is absolutely necessary, or if it's more about managing our own anxiety. And that's a hard place to be, because this is an anxious making time, but just encouraging everyone from a trauma-informed perspective to think about the individual unique needs of the family. You know, there's a lot of times when protocols get written in response or in reactivity to something difficult that's happened that end up not serving people well. So just, I'm not saying that anyone's suggestions are bad here. I'm just encouraging us to think of that. Any other comments about, as we're going to wrap up here, we have 4 minutes left, I believe, but about what's working so far for you, what's going well in remote visits?
And as you think about this, we would also welcome you as you try things or come up with things in your own programming to share them with us, because we would be happy to then just keep adding to the list of ideas in the document that we're just going to post, and we'll continue to update as people become more creative and think through things that worked really well, or the warnings of things that we didn't think about and didn't work so well. So we can continue to share those and support you all.
And remembering again that this isn't a place for perfectionism. So there's going to be a lot of trial and error, and that's just what's happening. I think we can, people keep, as you wrap it up, keep typing, but then, yeah.
So we just wanted to let you know that we'll be having 2 more webinars for the month of April, one on April 22nd, which we're still deciding. And then on April 29th, we'll be partnering with Casa de Esperanza on providing meaningful and effective language access. And so we'll also be talking about remote language access issues. So please be sure to attend those. And additionally, our webinars are always recorded, and the slides are available on our website from all previous webinars we've held this month. And then we will continue having our Tuesday drop-in and Thursday drop-in sessions. Once again, it's really wonderful to see everyone and have that time to connect. So please be sure to join us tomorrow. And please reach out to your OVW program specialist if you have any questions regarding temporary changes in delivering services. You know, we've been just suggesting that anything that you're coming up with, or if you're moving to remote services, to just keep them apprised of what your program is planning on doing. They've been very receptive and responsive to everyone. And lastly, Inspire Action is here for you always, evenings and weekends included. Call or text anytime. Yeah, if there's any questions, please chat in. We'd be happy to hear from you.
I was just going to highlight that a few people asked some specific questions about using Zoom for intakes and post-visit check-ins, and Jen took note of that in the chat, so it sounds like that'll be in consideration for future topics.
Yes. Thanks, Erin, for highlighting that.
Got them both, Kit and Gail. Got both of your requests.
Right. We appreciate you all joining us. Thank you for taking time to pause in your day and collectively come together and continue to think through something that creates a whole new world for us in terms of how this is all working and how this is managing. So we want to remind you to be kind and gentle to yourselves as you manage all of this, and please connect with who makes you feel calm and reassured as much as possible in any way that's possible right now, and to know that we are also here to support you in whatever way. So continue to reach out. If you need something, we'll try to be as responsive as we can to get you what you need. So we are grateful to be in partnership with you, and all of the collective thinking that's gone into all of the things that we have been able to put out to you all has not been in isolation. It's been all of your collective good thinking and good questions and a wonderment that has allowed us to create a receptacle to just disseminate as fast as we can what we're giving. So please continue to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Take good care.